Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dudes and dudettes, the sexy and the not so sexy, big children and little. Welcome to the information era, where everyone on the streets has a computer in their pocket, but nobody really knows shit.
Let's think this through.
Let's think this through.
Let's think this through. Let's think this through.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dudes and dudettes, the sexy and the not so sexy, big children and little. I am the novelist, author, poet, Lamont Anthony Wright, aka Graffiti Bleu. Let's get right to it. Let's think this through, shall we? Basically, what I am doing is I am taking a scientific method. There are many variations to the scientific method. And I'm taking that method and I am putting an artistic spin on it. Because I'm not a scientist, I'm an artist. Since there are so many variations on the scientific method, this is how we're going to break this down. Basically, this is how it's going to work. Since there are so many variations to the scientific method, there's 5 steps, 6 steps, 7 steps, depending on what scientific method that you're going by. The one that we are going to go by and modify artistically starts off with making an observation, then forming or asking a question based on the observation, then forming a hypothesis which answers the question, and then make a prediction based on a hypothesis. Then we'll do some experiments. These experiments are tongue-in-cheek. Since I'm not a scientist and I'm an artist and I'm not in a lab, right, with doing these controlled experiments where you control all of the variables. Experiment is really experience, where I'm taking my life experiences and my wisdom and things that I have witnessed that I can testify to as to the social experiments that I have seen over the years in life and whatnot. And I will be applying them to this podcast / blog, whichever you want to call it. And finally, after we take all of those experiments or experience, we will then analyze the data. After we analyze the data, I will give you my wisdom for whatever it's worth. And you can either accept my wisdom for what it is, or you can reject it. It really makes me know, never mind whether you accept or reject what I'm telling you in the confines of this podcast, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if you agree with me. What really matters is if you make up your own mind and get the muscle in between your ears active. The observation that I'm making for episode 3 of Let's Think This Through is that the phrase toxic masculinity has become amazingly popular as of late. I wonder why that is. I wonder who would make up such a term. So the observation of the phrase toxic masculinity becoming so freaking popular forces me to ask a question. And that question is masculinity toxic? Is masculinity toxic? My hypothesis that answers the question is no, masculinity is not toxic. No, it is not. Some people would say, well, we're not really talking about masculinity on a whole. We're just talking about certain segments of masculinity which are toxic. Okay, let's dig into this for a second. Toxic is defined as poisonous, very harmful or unpleasant in a insidious or pervasive way. Masculinity is defined as qualities or attributes regarded as characteristics of men. Femininity is defined as the qualities and characteristics regarded as the characteristics of women. Nowhere in the definition does it mention any facet of toxicity. With that being said, I will make a prediction. I predict that this label was manufactured with malicious intent. The intention of this label was not to eradicate poisonous, harmful, or unpleasant behavior. No. Instead, it was created to paint men as the villains and women as the victim. Yeah, I said it. When in reality, men's greatest weakness is their facade of strength, and women's greatest strength is their facade of weakness. The person who said that, I'll put their name on the screen perhaps. So let's go to the experiment portion of this blog, shall we? Or should I say experience. What I have witnessed in my lifetime is a number of negative labels given to certain groups of people to demonize and ostracize them for whatever reason. And there is well documented data in the world today that certainly proves my point. So as we slide into the analyze data part of this blog, let's look at some of the previous negative labels of society and see how effective they were, shall we? The indigenous people of this country were called savages for defending themselves from extinction. So we all know what that is, right? Europeans come over to the Americas. The indigenous people take care of them, teach them how to farm, fish, live off the land. And in return, they get stabbed in the back. And the Europeans decided, well, you're gonna have to die. We want this for us. Okay. And they're called savages. The descendants of the Moorish Empire and the people of African descent were labeled as lazy after being subjected to slavery and basically building a nation for free. During the Cold War, the enemies of our Russian enemies were made allies by the United States. They were militarized, trained, financed, and then consequently abandoned, only to take issue with us and us not listen, and then we labeled them as terrorists. Okay. It's been my experience that anytime a group of people is angry about something, when another group of people kind of, for their own reasons, wants to dismiss those people and say, get out of here, you don't know what you're talking about, get out of here, whatever, and they want to dismiss these people, the best way to dismiss them is to slap a label on them, you know? The label crazy comes to mind. If somebody's really tearing you a new one, and by all accounts, they're pretty much right and they're justified, and we just label them crazy, when in reality, yeah, sure, they may be a little touched in the head, But they didn't become mad for no reason. So we slap a label on them, like toxic. And basically I can go on and on with example after example after example, because I mean, really folks, how many labels, if I really took the time, I could really find a lot. And actually, since I took the time, because there is already a lot of information on the internet already about so-called toxic masculinity or whatever. So I really wanted to hit this particular podcast from a different angle, unlike anything that you may have heard before. And in a nutshell, after analyzing the data, right? In a nutshell, my thing is this. There are poisonous and unpleasant elements pretty much to everything. You know, for every beacon of light, there is a shadow, right? For every darkness, there's a light that comes from, or something to that effect, right? So when people are quick to label something, I mean, if you want to give it labels and that makes you feel better, I guess, you know, it's part of the human experience. You want to, you know, we make judgments on things. Making judgments is who we are. Some of us who try to live a higher version of ourselves, we do our best to try and not to judge, but we just can't escape that human thing where we're hardwired, friend or foe. We need to judge something, fight or flight for our safety. We need to know what your intentions are in most cases, and it's hard, it's extraordinarily difficult as a human being to not come up with certain assumptions about whoever you meet within inside the first 7 seconds or so that you come into contact with them. We make our judgments, you know what I mean? That could be right or wrong, but it's just who we are. You know, now our higher self's job, hopefully, if you're tapping into that person, we will listen to the concerns of our ego, and then we will deconstruct them with our higher selves. At least that's what I attempt to do, to just be like, okay, well, you really don't know that for sure, you know what I mean? So maybe wait and see, or get to know this person a little bit better, and perhaps you may be persuaded or enlightened into another idea. My problem with the label toxic masculinity is that, Jesus Christ, in this day and age, do men really need another thing to be vilified for? I mean, there are many words that are just being floated around, and many that I saw just in the research for this blog. And even doing the research for this podcast, blog, whichever you want to call it, sometimes I bounce between the two. The problem that I had is that if we really have a concern about poisonous behavior, unpleasant behavior, violent behavior, sexual assault, and those type of things, and we want to label them as masculine, well, there is a version from the other gender as well. And just because a woman's methods might not be as direct, or they might be a little bit more passive or a little indirect, doesn't mean that it's not poisonous or unpleasant behavior. You just log on to freaking Twitter, for Christ's sake. You know, some women can be extraordinarily vicious, can be extraordinarily unpleasant, okay? And just because a woman's methods may be more of a passive nature, whereas and she might not kick you in the freaking chest if you act up, doesn't mean that she won't destroy your freaking reputation. It's just a passive thing. It's not as bloody or brutal as putting an axe in somebody's face, you know, but it's not not toxic, okay? So basically, those me thinking things to conclusion, that is what I come up with. And I'm not sorry. I don't trust mass media when mass media wants to paint somebody as a victim. Anytime the masses want to paint one group of people as the villain, it always has malicious intent. Why are you painting these people as a villain? Everybody is capable of both light and dark. I don't sleep on anybody. You put anybody who's watching this, anybody within the sound of my voice, and everybody who ain't trying to F with this podcast at all. You catch them in the right circumstance, in the right moment, the right time, and you would be amazed at what they are capable of, what kind of darkness they may be capable of. The Bible said it itself, have faith not in man, right? It's all there for you, people. Well, that's just me thinking things through. This is episode 3. I really hope you enjoyed it. And after taking everything that I said, you could either accept what I told you, or you could reject every freaking thing I said. And that's okay, because the main goal is really not to get you on my side. I'm not really trying to convince you of anything. My job as an artiste is to get you to exercise that space in between your ears and make it active, right? So, until next time, folks, take care of yourself.